The golden cage, the Blackwood estate stretched across the hillside like a modernist dream of glass and steel, catching the sunset in golden reflections that belied the chill inside. Dahlia Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching gardeners trim the immaculate hedges into perfect geometric shapes. Like everything in her life, the beauty was precisely controlled, Mrs. Blackwood. The housekeeper's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Mr. Blackwood called. He won't be home for dinner again tonight. Something about the Singapore merger. Dahlia nodded, maintaining her practiced smile. Thank you, Teresa. You can tell the chef to prepare just for one. Once alone, she let her shoulders drop slightly. 12 years of marriage to Victor Blackwood, tech visionary and one of the 20 wealthiest men in America, had taught her to expect absence more than presence. She remembered when they'd met at university, she studying literature, he already launching his first startup. Back then, his intensity had been directed at her, too, not just his ambitions. Across town in the gleaming Blackwood Technologies headquarters, Victor was indeed working late, but not alone. Natasha Vega leaned over his desk, pointing at projections on a tablet. If we acquire Tech Fusion before the quarter ends, we'll control 60% of the market, she said, her voice carrying the slight rasp that Victor had found increasingly distracting over the past 6 months. Their board is resistant, Victor replied, rubbing his temples. I've prepared some leverage points. Natasha's red lacquered nails tapped the screen. Their CFO has been hiding losses. I have documentation. Victor looked up, genuinely impressed. How did you get that? Natasha smiled. I have my methods. That's why you hired me as your chief strategist, isn't it? I solve problems others can't. What Victor didn't know was that Natasha's ambitions extended beyond the boardroom. As his chief strategist, she'd watched him for 2 years, studying his habits, preferences, and weaknesses. She'd seen how his marriage to Dahlia had become little more than a convenient arrangement. The humble, supportive wife who managed his household and appeared at galas on his arm, while he built his empire. In Natasha's eyes, Dahlia was a relic of Victor's past, a placeholder. Victor needed someone who understood his world, his ambitions, someone like her. Later that evening, in her downtown apartment, Natasha made a call. I need information on someone, she said, pacing her minimalist living room. Discreetly. The man on the other end had a deep, measured voice. That's what I do, Ms. Vega. Who's the subject? Dahlia Blackwood. I need everything, past relationships, hidden vices, financial secrets, anything that might diminish her in certain eyes. The wife of Victor Blackwood, the man noted. This is sensitive territory. That's why I'm paying premium rates, Mr. Shaheen. I need results, not concerns. Rashid Shaheen considered declining. He typically avoided cases involving the ultra-wealthy, too many complications. But the name Blackwood had caught his attention for a different reason. I'll take the case, he said finally, but I work my way at my pace. Just find me something I can use, Natasha replied. What she couldn't know was that 15 years earlier, Rashid had attended a family wedding where his second cousin had been introduced to a promising young entrepreneur. That cousin was Dahlia before she became a Blackwood. As Natasha ended the call, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Victor had built an empire through strategic acquisitions and eliminating obstacles. She was simply following his playbook, and Dahlia Blackwood was the final obstacle between Natasha and everything she wanted. In her beautiful, empty house, Dahlia finished her solitary dinner and opened her laptop. Beyond her carefully maintained image as the perfect billionaire's wife, she had her own quiet pursuits. Her anonymous literary blog had thousands of followers who knew her only as the observer, never suspecting that their favorite cultural critic lived behind the walls of one of the most exclusive estates in the country. Tonight, however, she couldn't focus on writing. Something felt different, as though the air pressure had changed before a storm. Dahlia had survived in Victor's world by developing a sixth sense for trouble. She couldn't identify the threat yet, but she felt it approaching, like a shadow at the corner of her vision. The hired eye 3 weeks into his investigation, Rashid Shaheen sat in his modest office reviewing the files he'd compiled on Dahlia Blackwood. What he'd found wasn't what Natasha Vega hoped for. There were no scandals, no secret lovers, no embezzled funds or hidden addictions. Instead, he'd uncovered a woman of remarkable depth. Beneath her polished exterior, Dahlia volunteered anonymously at a downtown literacy center every Wednesday, the day she supposedly attended a women's luncheon club, she maintained. A secret literary blog with thoughtful cultural commentary that had earned respect in intellectual circles. And most surprisingly, she had quietly invested her personal inheritance in a foundation supporting female entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Rashid leaned back in his chair, conflict churning inside him. He hadn't seen Dahlia since that family wedding years ago, but he remembered her kindness to him when others had dismissed the black sheep cousin who chose investigation, work over the family's traditional medical career path. His phone buzzed with Natasha's name on the screen. This marked her 8th call this week. "Mr. Shaheen, your weekly reports are insufficient," she snapped when he answered. "I'm not paying for a character reference. I need leverage. Ms. Vega, I follow evidence, not wishes," Rashid replied coolly. "If there's nothing to find, there's always something," Natasha interrupted. "Everyone has secrets. Dig deeper. Her college years, previous relationships, family scandals, something we can amplify or distort if necessary. I need results within 2 weeks." After ending the call, Rashid stared at the photo of Dahlia on his desk. In it, she was reading to children at the literacy center, unaware she was being photographed. There was genuine joy in her expression that never appeared in the carefully composed society page photos of the Blackwoods. The decision formed slowly, but with certainty. He would meet with Dahlia. The following afternoon, Dahlia entered a quiet cafe several miles from the Blackwood estate. She'd received a cryptic message requesting a meeting signed only with the name Shaheen. The family connection had sparked enough curiosity to accept. Rashid stood when she entered. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Blackwood." "It's been a long time, Rashid," she said, studying his face. "And please call me Dahlia." Over the next hour, Rashid explained everything. Natasha's commission, the investigation, and his growing concern about Natasha's intentions. Dahlia listened without interruption, her expression remaining composed even as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. "She's looking for weaknesses," Rashid concluded, and becoming increasingly desperate to find them. Dahlia gazed out the window. "Victor's been working closely with her for months now. Late nights, weekend calls. I suspected there might be more, but this—" "I'm sorry," Rashid said. "I can refuse the case, warn Victor directly, no." Dahlia's voice was soft but carried unexpected steel. "If we simply expose her now, Victor will see it as jealousy, perhaps even manipulation on my part. Natasha is valuable to his business. He needs to see her true nature for himself. What are you suggesting?" A subtle smile crossed Dahlia's face. "Let's give Natasha exactly what she wants, a report on me. But perhaps not the one she's expecting." Across town, Natasha entered Victor's office without knocking, finding him reviewing acquisition documents. "The Tech Fusion Board is wavering," she announced triumphantly. "2 members have indicated they'll support our offer if we increase by just 5%. Victor smiled appreciatively. "You continue to impress me, Natasha." She perched on the edge of his desk, closer than professionally necessary. "That's my intention." "You know," Victor said, leaning back in his chair, "Dahlia and I are hosting the Foundation Gala next month. Would you handle the arrangements with our events team? I trust your judgment." Natasha masked her irritation. "Always Dahlia, always the wife hovering in the background?" "Of course," she replied smoothly. "Though I've been meaning to mention, I've noticed Dahlia seems distracted lately." "Is everything all right?" Victor frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "Just an observation. She's been taking private calls, leaving the charity board meetings early. Probably nothing." Natasha shrugged delicately. "I simply care about your well-being, Victor, both personal and professional." The seed planted, she changed the subject to market projections, while inwardly seething at Rashid's failure to provide her with concrete ammunition. Soon, she promised herself, soon Victor would see that his quiet, bookish wife was holding him back from the life he deserved, with her. Jasmine Kwan adjusted her glasses as she examined the documents spread across Rashid's desk. As Dahlia's closest friend and a corporate attorney, she'd agreed to help when Dahlia called, though she'd been skeptical until seeing the evidence. "This is methodical," Jasmine murmured, reviewing Natasha's emails that Rashid had obtained. "She's been positioning herself in Victor's world for over a year. The charity board, his mother's birthday arrangements, even befriending his sister. And now actively seeking to discredit Dahlia," Rashid added. Jasmine looked up at him, her keen eyes assessing. "Why are you helping? This could damage your professional reputation." Rashid met her gaze steadily. Some things matter more than reputation. Something shifted between them in that moment. Recognition of shared values that neither expected to find in the other. "We'll need more than just these emails," Jasmine said, returning to the documents but with a slight flush to her cheeks. "We need to understand exactly how far she's willing to go." Dahlia, who had been silently watching their interaction with interest, nodded thoughtfully. "Then perhaps it's time to give Natasha an opportunity to show us." The Silent Defense Jasmine's law office became their unofficial headquarters over the next 2 weeks. Between her legal expertise, Rashid's investigative skills, and Dahlia's intimate knowledge of Victor's world, they formulated a strategy that was neither vengeful nor passive, a measured response to Natasha's escalating manipulations. "She's requested financial records from your personal foundation," Rashid reported, setting his laptop on Jasmine's conference table. "Claimed to be conducting a compliance review authorized by Victor." Dahlia nodded, unsurprised. "And the foundation administrator?" "Called Victor's office to confirm and spoke with Natasha, who verified her authorization. They've scheduled a meeting for Thursday." Jasmine leaned forward. "This is exactly the opening we need. If we can document her misrepresenting herself, we can," Rashid confirmed. "I've arranged for the meeting to be recorded, with the administrator's permission." Dahlia observed the easy rapport that had developed between Rashid and Jasmine. Where once they'd been cautious around each other, now they communicated with the shorthand of people deeply in sync. It was a bright spot in this otherwise troubling situation. Later that evening, as Jasmine and Rashid reviewed surveillance footage, Dahlia excused herself for a rare dinner with Victor. These had become increasingly scarce as the Tech Fusion acquisition consumed his attention, and as Natasha inserted herself further into his daily schedule. "You're distracted tonight," Victor noted as they sat in their formal dining room, the table between them seeming wider than its actual 12 feet. Dahlia looked up from her barely touched salmon. "Am I? I suppose I've had the foundation on my mind." "Natasha mentioned you might be having concerns there." His casual mention of her name during their private dinner spoke volumes. "Did she?" Dahlia kept her tone neutral. "How thoughtful of her to be concerned about my projects." Victor studied his wife with the same analytical gaze he used for business opponents. "She's noticed you taking private calls, leaving meetings early. If there are problems with the foundation, I can have her look into it." "That won't be necessary," Dahlia replied softly. "Everything will be clear very soon." For a moment, Victor seemed about to press further, but his phone chimed with Natasha's distinctive notification sound. He glanced at the screen. "The Tech Fusion CEO is wavering again. I need to take this." Dahlia nodded, watching him leave the table without a backward glance. For 12 years, she had accepted his divided attention as the cost of loving a visionary. But now she wondered if she'd simply been too willing to disappear into the background of his life. "She's getting careless," Jasmine observed 3 days later, reviewing the recording from the foundation meeting. They watched as Natasha clearly claimed to speak with Victor's authority, requesting confidential information about donors and grant recipients. "Overconfident," Rashid corrected. "She believes she's already won." They had compiled a substantial file. Natasha had attempted to access Dahlia's medical records, contacted Victor's family members with subtly disparaging concerns about Dahlia's commitment to Victor, and even approached former classmates from Dahlia's university days seeking unflattering stories. Most disturbingly, she'd begun excluding Dahlia from social and charitable events where she had always represented the Blackwood family, telling organizers that Mrs. Blackwood has stepped back from public engagements temporarily. "She's trying to erase me," Dahlia said quietly, "to create a dahlia-shaped void that she can step into." Jasmine squeezed her friend's hand. "Not if we can help it." Rashid watched this exchange with admiration. Despite everything, Dahlia had never spoken of Natasha with hatred or plotted revenge. She simply wanted the truth exposed and her place in her own life secured. "There's something else," he said. "I've confirmed Natasha has been modifying Victor's calendar, deleting your appointments with him, scheduling conflicts during your anniversary dinner." "It's comprehensive." Dahlia absorbed this with remarkable composure. "The annual Investors Gala is next week. Victor will announce the Tech Fusion acquisition there." "Perfect timing," Jasmine nodded. "All the key players in one room." "Not a public confrontation," Dahlia cautioned. "Nothing dramatic or embarrassing for Victor. This needs to be handled with dignity." As they refined their approach, Rashid found himself increasingly aware of Jasmine's presence, her incisive mind, her loyalty to Dahlia, the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she concentrated. Twice he'd caught her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, and the electricity between them had become impossible to ignore. "We should review the security footage from Victor's office one more time," Jasmine suggested as evening approached. "I'll leave you to it," Dahlia said, gathering her things with a knowing smile. "I have that charity board meeting, the one Natasha doesn't know I'm still attending." After she left, a charged silence filled the room. Rashid moved to the window, ostensibly watching Dahlia's car depart. "This case has become more than professional for you," Jasmine observed quietly. He turned to face her. "Yes, but not for the reasons you might think." "Tell me," she said, moving closer. "I took this case for money," Rashid admitted. "I stayed because of family loyalty. But now—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "Now," she prompted. "Now I find myself caring about the outcome for entirely different reasons." Jasmine's smile was both challenge and invitation. "We should discuss those reasons. Perhaps over dinner?" As they left the office together, neither noticed Natasha Vega's sleek black car parked across the street, its driver watching with narrowed eyes as the detective and the lawyer walked away side by side. The revelation. The Blackwood Technologies annual Investors Gala transformed the National Museum's Grand Hall into a temple of modern luxury. Under crystalline chandeliers, the elite of the business world mingled with politicians and celebrities, all orbiting Victor Blackwood, the evening's gravitational center. Dahlia arrived separately from Victor, who had been in meetings all day. She wore midnight blue, elegant but understated, her only adornment a vintage sapphire pendant that had belonged to Victor's grandmother. It was a deliberate choice, a reminder of her place in the family's history. Mrs. Blackwood, Natasha appeared at her side, resplendent in a daring red gown. "I wasn't sure you'd attend tonight. Victor mentioned you weren't feeling well." "Did he?" Dahlia smiled pleasantly. "How strange." "I feel perfectly fine." Natasha's perfectly lined eyes narrowed slightly. "The Tech Fusion announcement is crucial for Victor. Perhaps you could avoid monopolizing his attention. The Japanese investors are particularly sensitive to proper protocol." "Thank you for your concern," Dahlia replied. "I've been managing these events for 12 years now. I believe I understand the nuances." Before Natasha could respond, Jasmine approached them, elegant in emerald green. "Dahlia, there you are. And Ms. Vega? How convenient. There's someone who's been hoping to speak with you both." Rashid stood nearby, uncharacteristically formal in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. The surprise on Natasha's face quickly hardened into suspicion. "Mr. Shaheen, I didn't expect to see my private investigator at this event." "Former investigator," Rashid corrected smoothly. "I've closed your case." Victor approached, placing a proprietary hand on Natasha's back. "You know each other?" A moment of perfect silence stretched between them. Dahlia met Natasha's gaze steadily, offering one last chance for retreat. Natasha made her choice. "Victor, there's something you should know about your wife." Indeed there is, Dahlia interrupted gently. And about Ms. Vega as well. She nodded to Rashid, who produced a slim leather portfolio. What is this? Victor demanded, his expression darkening. Evidence, Jasmine answered, of a systematic campaign to undermine Dahlia's position in your life and company. Over the next 15 minutes, in a private anteroom away from curious eyes, Victor Blackwood's world tilted on its axis. He remained standing as document after document was presented. Natasha's communications with Rashid commissioning an investigation into his wife. Manipulated calendar entries, falsified authorizations, recordings of her misrepresentations to Foundation staff. This is absurd, Natasha protested, though her confidence was visibly crumbling. Victor, she's clearly manipulating you. I was simply protecting your interests by hiring someone to investigate my wife. Victor's voice was dangerously quiet. By erasing her appointments from my calendar? By impersonating my authority to access confidential information? You've been distracted, consumed by a marriage that no longer serves you, Natasha insisted desperately. I understand your vision, your ambition, in ways she never could. Victor turned to Dahlia, truly seeing her perhaps for the first time in years. You've known about this. For how long? Long enough, Dahlia answered softly. Rashid is my distant cousin. When Natasha hired him, he came to me. And you didn't come to me immediately? Would you have believed me? Dahlia asked. Or would you have seen it as jealousy, insecurity, maybe even an attempt to remove a valuable asset from your company? The truth of her assessment was written across Victor's face. I needed you to see for yourself, she continued, not just what she was doing, but what our marriage had become. That you could be systematically separated from me for months and barely notice the distance growing between us. Outside, the gala continued, investors waiting eagerly for Victor's announcement. But inside this room, something far more significant was unfolding, the careful dismantling of illusions that had sustained them all. Ms. Vega, Victor said finally, his voice controlled but cold, you'll tender your resignation effective immediately. My security team will escort you to clear your office tonight. Natasha's composure shattered. You can't. After everything I've done, you've done quite enough, Victor cut her off. Be grateful I'm not pursuing legal action for your fraudulent representations of my authority. As security discreetly removed a shaken Natasha, Victor faced Dahlia alone. Rashid and Jasmine had tactfully withdrawn to give them privacy. 12 years, Victor said quietly. And I never saw... We both stopped seeing clearly some time ago, Dahlia replied. Victor reached for her hand but hesitated. I need to make the Tech Fusion announcement. The investors, even now the business came first. Dahlia nodded, unsurprised. Of course. We can talk later. But as she turned to leave, Victor caught her arm. No, we've postponed later for too many years. He pulled out his phone and sent a brief message. Philip can handle the announcement. This is more important. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Dahlia saw uncertainty in her husband's eyes, and with it, the glimmer of possibility. Meanwhile, in the museum's East Gallery, Rashid found Jasmine gazing at a painting, a solitary figure silhouetted against a vast landscape. Will she be all right? He asked, coming to stand beside her. Jasmine considered the question. I think so. Dahlia has always been stronger than anyone realized, including Victor. And us? Rashid ventured. Now that this case is closed? Jasmine turned to face him, a smile playing at her lips. I believe we're just beginning. The awakening morning light filtered through the guest bedroom window where Victor had spent the night. After hours of painful, necessary conversation, they had agreed to move carefully, neither rushing to reconciliation nor giving up on their marriage. For the first time in years, they had spoken with complete honesty about their shared past, their disconnected present, and the possibility of a different future. Dahlia sat in the garden, watching bees navigate the lavender. Her phone chimed with a message from Jasmine. Breakfast? The usual place? 30 minutes later, she joined Jasmine at their favorite cafe. Rashid was there too, his presence at these meetings now expected. How are you? Jasmine asked, studying her friend's face. Surprisingly peaceful, Dahlia answered. Whatever happens next, at least it will be based on truth. Victor called me this morning, Rashid mentioned. Asked me to investigate everyone in his executive team. He's concerned about other influences Natasha may have cultivated. Will you take the case? Dahlia asked. Rashid exchanged glances with Jasmine. We're considering it, as a consulting team. The subtle emphasis on team and the warmth in their shared look confirmed what Dahlia had suspected. Something precious had grown amid the chaos of recent weeks. You deserve happiness, she told them both. Don't waste time like we did. 3 months later, the Blackwood estate hosted an intimate gathering, just 30 guests instead of the hundreds that typically attended their events. Victor stood somewhat awkwardly beside Dahlia, still relearning how to exist in her orbit after years of distraction. Thank you all for coming, Dahlia addressed their friends. This celebration has been long overdue. They were commemorating the public launch of her foundation, now expanded with Victor's full backing. No longer anonymous, she had stepped into her own light, not as Mrs. Blackwood, but as Dahlia Hariri Blackwood, reclaiming her family name alongside his. Victor watched his wife with newfound respect as she outlined the foundation's mission to support female entrepreneurs from marginalized communities. The passion in her voice, the clarity of her vision. How had he failed to recognize these qualities for so long? Across the room, Rashid and Jasmine stood close together, their relationship now open and flourishing. They had indeed formed a consulting partnership, combining her legal expertise with his investigative skills to offer corporate ethics and security services. Their first major client, Blackwood Technologies. She's remarkable, Jasmine murmured, watching Dahlia captivate the room. They both are, Rashid replied, finding their way back to each other after everything. Victor approached them during the reception, still carrying the humility that recent events had instilled. Your report on the executive team was thorough, he told Rashid. Uncomfortable reading, but necessary. The restructuring seems to be proceeding well, Jasmine observed. Victor nodded. Better than expected. Though nothing quite compares to finding out your chief strategist was plotting to replace your wife. Ex-chief strategist, Rashid corrected. Indeed. Victor's expression darkened momentarily. I heard she's joined a competitor in Singapore. With significantly reduced responsibilities, Jasmine added. The corporate world had quietly taken note of Natasha's methods, and doors that had once welcomed her ambition now closed in caution. Later that evening, after the guests departed, Dahlia found Victor in his study, once his exclusive domain, now a shared space where they often worked side by side. The foundation launch was a success, she said, sitting across from him. Because of you, Victor set aside his tablet. I've been thinking about what you said last week, about balance. Dahlia waited, giving him space to continue. I've decided to step back from direct operations at Blackwood Technologies. The board approved Jackson as the new CEO this morning. Dahlia's surprise was evident. That's significant. I'll remain as chairman, but with a reduced role. He looked directly at her, still getting accustomed to truly seeing his wife. I've missed too much already. I don't want to wake up in another decade and wonder where the time went. In the garden below, visible through the study window, Rashid and Jasmine walked hand in hand among the evening blooming flowers. Their laughter drifted upward, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected circumstances could yield beautiful beginnings. We have a second chance, Victor said, following Dahlia's gaze to the couple below. If you still want it. Dahlia considered the man before her, brilliant but flawed, powerful yet vulnerable in ways few ever witnessed. The past couldn't be erased, but perhaps it could be the foundation for something stronger, more authentic than what they'd had before. I do, she said finally. Not to return to what was, but to create something new. Victor reached across the desk, palm upward in invitation. After a moment's hesitation, Dahlia placed her hand in his, a simple gesture bridging the careful distance they'd maintained these past months. Outside, twilight deepened into night. Inside the study, a marriage long encased in gilded obligation began its transformation into something chosen, deliberate, and awake. It wouldn't be easy. Trust, once fractured, heals slowly. But for the first time in years, both Dahlia and Victor were fully present in the same moment, facing the same direction. And sometimes, that's enough of a beginning.